Mr. President, as usual, which it became a tradition, if you have anything on your mind regarding the future of new media, we will give you a chance to ask this distinguished panel. But before that, I would like to pick on Mr. Richard's comment regarding the bubble, which I think is very interesting one. And Tom Kuhn, are you here? Tom, if you are here, would you please come forward? I'm interested to hear your view. Tom is... Pardon? Tom, are you willing to come? Is he coming or not? I don't see.
Yes, he's here.
He's here. So run.
Thank you. Hello, yes.
Hi, so Tom is a banker with Allen & Company. Allen & Company is one of the most respected bankers in this space, and we would like to know if it is a bubble or not.
That's a good question.
Simple question.
I think they're great companies. Mr. Chambers' company among them, Publicis among them, and I think there are values in those companies that'll be unlocked by what we heard about earlier from Maurice and Julius. And there are others who I think are perhaps a bit overvalued, but in general, solid businesses and solid economies, I count Israel among those solid economies, will thrive. And if you take a long perspective, I would think not.
So you still believe that values should go up?
Well, I think that good companies' values should go up as they grow and thrive, and I don't know about the broader market.
Okay, Julius, are you willing to use the crystal ball also?
Ask a question again, Yossi?
The question is, are we in a bubble or not?
Oh, I think we're in a period of tremendous value creation as measured by the value that consumers, small businesses are getting new every day. We're also in a period of disruption where traditional companies are having a harder time meeting consumer needs and demands in a new world. And so I'm not sure that there's a yes or a no. I'm bullish on the opportunity of new technologies and disrupting just about everything that we do to create more and more value. And we see it here in Israel and the US, entrepreneurs who are inventing everyday things that we couldn't imagine the day before. That's consistent with more investment, more innovation, more job creation, more value creation, but it won't be every single company.
Okay. Maurice, how digital advertisement is doing compared to the incumbent one?
I would like to answer first on the bubble, because I'm most of the time 100% in agreement with Stefan, and on this aspect I will have a slightly different opinion. I think that there is maybe a overvalue for some companies like Apple, Google, maybe Facebook. But the real issue is not that there is a bubble there, is that a lot of companies which are well in this field of digital are undervalued. And I believe this is the case for the carriers, for the manufacturers, and there is a lot of value to be unlocked, which does exist potentially, and I'm very confident that we will see in the future the stock price of these companies going up. So I'm much more concerned by the fact that there is a deflation of the value of these companies rather than an inflation of the other ones.
You are hopeless optimist, as we say.
No, I'm what I am, optimistic.
You know what is the difference between optimist and pessimist?
I know the definition of President Perez, is that they are born the same way, they die the same way, but they live differently. N'est-ce pas?
You are a good student. Mr. President, do you want to use your prerogative and ask the panel about the future of media something? You have a microphone?
You see, what do you want me to make a question or make a speech?
You are the boss, you know, you do whatever you want.
You are now the boss, not me.
We will call you to the stage in a few minutes, but right
Okay,
now...
so I shall wait for the few minutes.
Okay. Mr. Chambers, please.
Yoshi, please call me John. That way I won't feel so old or formal. But if you watch what is about to happen, you are going to see in total probably the valuations for businesses increase over the next decade. But there are going to be many winners and losers. And in 2001, the bubble occurred. You had PE ratios of a Microsoft at 60 times. You had Intel at 70 times, Cisco at 200 times. That was clearly a setup for a bubble. If you look at what is today's business, the PE ratios are remarkably low around the world. However, there are some new social media groups that have a higher PE ratios. I think if you take them in total and you add the value and you think out 5 years in total, they'll do very well. But there are clearly going to be some winners and losers within it. But I think it goes back to the purpose of this panel. The companies that do not change, regardless of how strong their brand is today, will get left behind. The countries who do not change will get left behind. The individuals who don't learn how to reinvent themselves will have trouble getting jobs. And so I think that's really what you're bringing us home on, is how do we control our own destiny, and how do great nations like Israel continue to reinvent themselves and have the courage to change when all of us know we like to talk about change, but the last thing we really want to do, Julius, is ask you to change us.
Thank you. John, you heard yesterday and today the enormous growth in bandwidth and data consumption that everybody is speaking about, including earlier during this session. And all of us are counting on you to roll out the routers, which will enable to do all this huge traffic. Will you be able to roll out all these routers? I have something in this question, but I'm interested to.
Sure. Where Yoshi's leading me is if you look at the bandwidth requirements, they aren't going to increase by 100% per year like the statistics say. They're going to increase by 400 to 500 to 600% a year. In a country with 7 million people like Israel, you will have more than 7 million TV stations. Each person won't have their own Facebook page. They'll have their own TV station. They'll have their kids' soccer games on that. They'll communicate with their colleagues on different communities of interest, etc. What that means is the concept of the internet is going to have to grow equally as exponentially as fast. So 8 years ago, we introduced a high-end router that could do do 1 billion phone calls. And that was when the majority of loads on networks were often voice, and the monetary model was there as well. People said you might sell 7 of those because there are 7 billion people in the world. We sold 6,000 of them. We are now building high-end routers that do 1 billion videos. And with all the appropriate caveats for anybody that's a shareholder, you will probably see more of those sold than you did the original high-end router. Technology will not be our problem. It's how you take technology and change the process, the regulation. It's how you change the culture. It's how do we that are not teenagers think like teenagers and make these devices easier to use and transforms our companies, much as Stefan and Maurice both said. How do we work with key regulatory agencies to achieve the goals of the countries and yet have key businesses still be able to make a profit? How will we do that, I think, is the real question, more than the technology. Can I just add one thing to this? Because this is a tremendous challenge to seizing the opportunities that we're talking about. And let me just focus on the spectrum challenge. John's statistics are completely right. Here's a way to just think about it. The smartphone that you all probably have in your pockets puts a demand on spectrum that's not 100% or 500% more than the feature phone you upgraded from, but 25 times more. And the tablet that you have puts a demand on spectrum that's 150 times more. Here's the truth. No one in the broadband economy or the regulatory space anticipated this. The networks didn't anticipate it. Your router companies and other technologies didn't anticipate it. And government policy didn't anticipate this kind of increase. And so one of the examples of areas where we will fail if we don't change is this one. We've been working in the U.S. On policies to efficiently, in a market-oriented way, transfer spectrum from older, less efficient uses to new uses. We call it incentive auctions. We've been looking at new uses of unlicensed spectrum like Wi-Fi, which John knows so much about. We've been talking to carriers about small cell technologies. And we also know that people in this room, people in Israel, people in Silicon Valley and other places, people at Cisco will invent solutions to this and talk about value creation, because this is a very real problem that threatens to be a drag on economic growth and all the opportunities if we don't tackle it.
Stefan, one question to you. You mentioned that you are active in 25 African countries. Maybe you would like, from this vantage point, you would like to share with us your thought about the future of Africa.
Africa is a land for growth, for economic growth, for demographic growth. Within 2021, human being out of 7 will be African. Africa is also a continent for business, for small business especially. And in fact, the reality of Africa is probably slightly different from the common image that a lot of people have about this continent. Today, the GDP per capita in the whole Africa is higher than it is in India. Of course, Africa is also a land of contrast. You have 2 big countries, South Africa and Nigeria, that stand for more or less 30% of the total GDP. You have very impressive gaps and contrasts between very poor countries and very dynamic countries, but as in the whole, Africa is, for our industry, clearly one of the last, I would say, areas of real growth in our industry. Now, it is also a continent where fixed networks are very poor, which probably explains that the wireless communication, mobile, has known a tremendous success. I mentioned this figure of 650 million Africans using a cellular phone. And what is also interesting is that Africa, for our industry, is also a land for innovation. I would mention maybe the most spectacular of it, which is mobile banking. As you know, the bank penetration of the banking system in Africa is still low. You have an average of 10% of people having a bank account. And in fact, it's really opened the way for operators like we are in Africa to offer to our customers banking services based on their mobile phone. And it is very successful. Today we have more than 4 million users for our Orange Money services. It's a very simple to use service that in fact enable people to pay invoices for power, for water, for instance, or even to be paid for their wage, or to do also transfers to their families. This is an example of something new, because it's very difficult for us to implement this kind of new services in Europe, because banks are very powerful and it's more complicated. But in Africa, clearly, there is a real appetite for this kind of innovations. And probably a part of the future in the telecom industry will come also from Africa, from emerging countries, generally speaking. And now, one of the big challenges that we have in Africa as a telco, but also for the rest of the industry, Cisco, the handset manufacturers, is to provide to Africa the tools of the digital world that will be affordable in Africa. For instance, we desperately look for a smartphone for Africa at maybe $50, $60. Honestly, this doesn't exist today, But I'm sure that within the next 12 months, we will have smartphones at $50, and it will have a tremendous success in Africa because it will give to hundreds of millions of people access to internet wherever they are, thanks to the mobile networks that we have in this country. So as a whole, it's a very exciting part of the world for our industry. Of course, it's a risky also area, but I would say that as far as we are concerned, we have been there for more than 20 years, and I think that we now know how to manage from time to time political situations or social situations that can be clearly dangerous.
Thank you, Stefan. Mr. Chambers.
If you watch what Stefan really said to us, is his company, France Telecom, has moved further in the last decade than it has, in my opinion, the prior 50 years before that. Their primary revenue stream, voice, went away. Their movement now is to mobility and applications on top of mobility, i.e. the banking. The movement is now to video and entertainment and the interfaces among friends and family type of concepts. This cloud, instead of providing connectivity to the business customers and consumers, they're going to provide new services which will tie their brand to the consumers in businesses they didn't do before. How do they monetize this on over-the-top players, adjust to regulatory issues? And it's all about speed of services delivery. Key takeaway, those were words that most service providers didn't even use a decade ago. And the service providers who survive will do that remarkably well with this new media type of capability. Would that be a fair comment in summary?
Thank you, John. I must say one thing, John, you are really frustrating me. We are friends, right? We can talk openly, nobody here.
Okay, I didn't mean to do so, but I've got to ask you about your suspenders.
You want me to tell them about the suspenders? These suspenders, my wife bought me because of John Chambers, because I attended an event of him and I was about to face a very embarrassing situation, which I'm not going to go into it. True? John, you talk about the young guys, the young guys, the young guys, the young guys. What about Dr. Ruth and myself? You know, we are not young guys anymore.
Well, what it says is that I think our children, our young people, are very creative, very empowered, but they're chaotic. I think our generation has the ability to focus this in a constructive way, to do it in a detailed type of plan, and it's really the combination of the two that make for great countries or great companies. And so I think we have a good future.
Okay, thank you. And last word before we move to our last part of this session, which will begin in like 2 minutes, is to our great friend Maurice Levy. How would you like to wrap up this session?
To wrap up, I honestly don't know. The only thing I'm pretty sure about, not only this session, but what has been said, and when you listen to everyone, is that everything for the future will be about change. And it is clear that it is not only one word. We should not think, okay, it's just the kind of word. It is an attitude. It is a behavior. It is also something which is very difficult because we are used to a few reflexes and we have some instinct and we are deciding very often based on our instinct, and we have to understand that this is no longer valid. If we want really to have impact in the future, we have to dramatically change our organization, the way we think, the way we behave, and to think about the society differently, to be more open to innovation, to be more open to the new generation, but also to the mature generation, because I believe that, including somebody like you can have one day one idea. We should not be desperate about that, Yossi.
The fact that you have more hair than me, shouldn't make you conceited, you know.
So that is what I would like for me to take out from what I have learned today, from John, from Julius, from Stefan. I think that really the future will be about change.
Before we move to the next part of the session, I would like to thank you on behalf of all the audience, John Chambers, Julius Janikowski, Maurice Levy, Stéphane Richard. Okay, thank you very much.